Welcome to Conversations with Nathalie and Lalantia. And today we're going to be talking about Halloween or Samhain or anything like that fits the theme of Halloween and Samhain. So talking about maybe experiences of Halloween as a kid and how we celebrated as a kid, the things that we do traditionally in our different countries, maybe talking a little bit about ghosts or any experiences that we have with ghosts, maybe, and we'll just kind of take the conversation wherever it goes. So if you are new here, welcome. My name is Lalantia, and with me is Nathalie, and on my screen, Nathalie is above me, but probably for you, she's next to me on one side or the other. And we do videos every week that are conversations about different topics. So it's like teachings, but a lot of our own experiences, and then taking questions that people may have in regards to the topics that we're talking about and that kind of thing. So we were going to be talking about animal communication. But because it is Halloween tomorrow, we thought that it would be a good idea to kind of use this time to talk about Halloween or Samhain or whatever words you want to use for this time of year or whatever you celebrate. So I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, me too. I'm so excited. And as I was scrolling to the group, I was just looking at everything everyone posted this week, and it's funny because it seems that when I go on my laptop, I see different things than I see on my phone. And I just came across the post that Coral Zutter posted, and it's full moon will shine on Halloween for the first time since 1944. That's amazing. Like, that is such a cool thing.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty amazing too. And I knew that it was
Yeah.
special. Like, I knew that it was special that we have a full moon on Halloween, but I didn't know how special it really is.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like a perfect time to do a ritual, if you ask me.
Yes, it really is a perfect time to do rituals. And I know for me in my membership group, we are doing a full moon. We're doing our regular full moon circle, but we're doing it with the Samhain energy. And so it's going to be like a ritual and circle and healing and releasing. And like it's going to be like extra powerful because of all of the energies that are happening. So,
Yeah, definitely. Wow, that sounds amazing. Like, that's going to be so much fun.
yeah, it really is. So I guess we can greet people. So hello, Daphne. Thank you for joining us. Hello, Lisa. And hello, Beth. Beth says, yay, full moon ritual sounds amazing. Yeah, it is the perfect time. So this time of year, it is a lot around shadows and looking into our shadows and working with our ancestors. And so a lot of that work that seems a little bit heavy and is uncomfortable for a lot of people because we have so much conditioning around this being dark, like dark in like a bad way. And really it's dark, but not in a bad way. We need to look at our darkness and our shadows, and it's not anything to be afraid of, but we can bring light to those places and see more into our subconscious around the things that we're holding on to right now. And the veil is super thin, so we're able to connect with our ancestors more easily. We're able to connect with any energies really that aren't in our physical world. So it's a really great time to be, taking more time to connect.
Yeah, definitely. And that's so cool because I was actually thinking about doing that, doing like a connection with my ancestors this weekend. So I think it's really cool that you bring that up.
Yeah, it is. It is a really good time to be doing that. And I know last year at this time I had launched a program that is about looking at your shadows. And I was thinking about that. It was like right around now when that came out, and that was working with your ancestors and going into your shadows through the world tree. And it was so incredibly powerful. I mean, it is incredibly powerful. I still run the program, but it's just like that perfect time of year to be really looking into those things, maybe holding you back from really stepping fully or more fully into your light.
That's so interesting because I was actually doing a ritual where I was journaling about cosmic experiences that have come forward for me, and guidance that came forward for me. And it's like they are all like these pieces that were like separate all over the year. And I actually started writing them down all together, like following in synchronic order. And it's so interesting because I was starting to notice connections coming up that I didn't see before. So I think it's really interesting how it's like uh, co-creating that shadow aspect with like the thinning of the veil and like making new connections that I wasn't able to see before. So I think that's really interesting, and definitely the ancestral energy that comes forward within that.
Yeah, for sure. And I know for me, because I don't label myself as anything, like I might joke about being a witch and I wouldn't say that I'm not a witch, but I also don't like label myself as a witch, right? I don't have like any labels, but I kind of do the work in all of these different arenas of energies, right? Like work in energies in lots of different ways. And I forgot where I was going with this. There was something that I was going to say about this specifically, and now I can't remember. Maybe it'll come back to me. But yeah, I think that I a lot of my clients, when I'm talking to them, when I've been talking with them, a lot of them have been saying that they are feeling that pull to work with like their witchy energy, their witchy magical
Yeah.
side, and that really more earthy elements, and really the ancestral work, and really deepening that connection. And for a lot of people that's really intimidating and scary. And a lot of us have been really conditioned because we may have grown up in really religious homes like I did, where we were taught that that's so wrong and pretty much the worst thing you can do is to dabble in witchcraft and you're going to end up in hell. And that is basically what was ingrained in me. And I know that that isn't the truth. And I don't really have, I mean, I'm not going to say that I don't have those and those beliefs still holding me back, because there may be certain things that sometimes it sneaks in. It's there, maybe there, like so deeply ingrained that it may come up sometimes. But it took a lot of work in releasing these things, even though I never believed the same way as my parents did. It's still like when it's so ingrained in you, I think there's maybe like this little part that is just like, what if they're right and I really will go to hell if I dabble in witchcraft? And so, it's like that wanting to be cautious in working in the dark arts.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally get that. And I think like this is such an important step in that process because I think we often forget, like you said, like our minds are filtered so many times, and we sometimes forget about that. And I think this is a perfect time to really let go of those illusions because, like you were saying, ancestry is coming up, past lives are coming up, and we can't forget that, like, with the thinning of the veil, I can see like these connections so much more clearer than I ever thought about them before. Like we can, like when you were talking about being a witch and all that stuff, and that sometimes it comes up for you because you live with these people that have a more closed off mind in that regard, so you feel like that resistance within yourself. Like I think that sometimes we forget that when we are connecting to our ancestors, that we could actually be connecting to a person that we were, because we could be our own ancestor. And I think we often forget that. So we could have been an ancestor of ourselves, like of this body. We could be an ancestor that has lived a life as a witch, and that energy that we are bringing with us in this life, of being persecuted for being a witch, you know. And I think so many of us have that residual energy within us of being a witch in one point at our lives and being persecuted for that fact. So I think it's really important that we notice these things and that it comes forward in these special ways, so we can't really go out of the way for it. Like we can't ignore it, it's coming forward for us to deal with right now. And I think it's really important to be open to that, and like at least acknowledge that this is something that is there for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know for me, you know, you know a lot about a lot of my different past lives, but the one, and I have shared some about this recently, but one that came up for me recently, really recently, was being sacrificed. And it was actually druids who sacrificed me in that lifetime. So that had caused a lot of energy within myself. And while I hadn't had an awareness, like I was interested in druidry and like learning about it and all of that. I didn't have such an awareness prior around druids, but I did have a resistance to rituals that seemed dark in nature to me. And it was that energy that I was holding on to around me being sacrificed and that whole ritual of being sacrificed, basically. So that really made me realize how much I have held myself back in my own rituals. I call myself like a lazy witch. Because I make my rituals pretty simple. A lot of it is just going into an energy, or I'll do my rituals like in a journey or like travel somewhere and not do it so much in my physical space. But even when I was doing that, I would hold myself back because and I didn't know why at the time, I didn't recognize it, but it was because I had been sacrificed in a ritual. So that caused my own fear. And that's just one way that I know that I have been killed or murdered.
Yeah.
Or and I didn't really see much about my life other than that. I had to like heal that part and be able to move on from being sacrificed. But once I was able to do that, now I'm like, I just want to have like a yard and a big old fire pit. And I'm afraid I do have a fear of fire. And I don't know, I haven't seen many past life stuff regarding fire for myself. Maybe one. There's one I'm seeing right now. But fire is something that I really do have a resistance to. And that's why I usually do my fire rituals and like a journey or meditation. Because the physical fire I do have a resistance to, but I don't if it's not in my physical world, in my like physically there. But there's this part of me now that I am wanting to have a yard so that I can have a fire pit and have a little fire, not a too big of a roaring fire, and be able to have people come around the fire and meet in person doing these rituals together. And I'm really feeling that vibe and like really wanting to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting that you bring up the rituals, because you do have the other side to that, to not having specifically that fear that comes up within you without you consciously knowing why. But we have the other side of that, like the ancestral energy coming forward, or the shadow work energy coming forward, or doing the rituals unconsciously, like because it's so ingrained within us. So, and I think that when the veil is thinning this much, that we do these things so much more, without us even consciously knowing that we're opening up to doing these things more, that we start doing these rituals without us even consciously knowing that we're doing rituals.
Yeah. Yes. And we're feeling the energy. So I know that we talked about this a few days ago, and I had a lot of people reach out to me about what's going on with the energy. And it was like really thick. Like it was just like exhausting to do anything. Like you just want to like lay in bed and do nothing. And I made myself go into nature and I laid on the ground. The weather cooperated, so I was able to do that. And I laid on the ground and I went for a walk through the trees and everything and was able to kind of lift some of that heaviness. But a lot of this energy is coming up right now for us. It is that shadow energy that's coming up collectively that we're feeling. So it's not all within ourselves. We feel it within ourselves, but it may not be all ours because we're feeling this so much for the collective and that heaviness that's being released. So we felt it really strongly a couple days ago, and that need to be able to recognize, we need a little bit more rest, and that's okay. But also, what is ours and what isn't? What do we need to look at within ourselves? What are we holding on to? What heaviness needs to be released from us, and what heaviness is just part of that collective that we can just take off our shoulders and be like, this isn't mine to carry.
Yes, yes, definitely. So I'm actually really excited to see if the rest of you guys who are here tonight think that you have been a witch in a past life. So definitely let us know in the comments if you want to share anything, if you think that you have a past life that is in connection with the beings that come up around Halloween, specifically witches within this moment. But I think there are a couple of beings that come forward on Halloween that could be a past life of yours, you know?
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
absolutely. I would love to hear as well. And also, I know like when I do a lot of past life work with my clients, and it has come up a lot of times of lifetimes where they have been killed for being a witch or being accused of being a witch, even if they weren't really a witch,
yeah.
you know, and it's some really heavy trauma. It's some heavy trauma that we carry around for that from that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think people sometimes forget that we even carry that trauma in our physical body right now, even if it was in another lifetime.
Yeah, we do. And that was another thing I was thinking about. I remember having a conversation with someone about this a while ago or a few years ago, and I was talking to them about ancestors. So we have ancestors that are from our lineage now, like from our physical lineage, right? But we
Yeah.
also have our ancestors from when we had other lifetimes in other bodies. So we have, yes, generally when we're talking about ancestors, we're talking about our lineage from within our physical bodies that we're in right now. But I don't think that we can really discount or dismiss these ancestors that we have had when we were in other lineages, other physical lineages. Um, and so that's like a lot of ancestors.
Yeah.
And it also takes us out of just this world and this realm of ancestors and into our ancestors and our fairy lineage or our lineages on other planets. Like think about how many ancestors we really have when we take into account all of these different ones.
That's so funny because I was just thinking the exact same thing. And I was even thinking, like, what do you guys think about that? Like, all of these beings that are so known for Halloween, you know, like zombies, vampires, werewolves, you know, ghosts, all that kind of thing. Like, those legends come from somewhere, right? So, it might be possible, like we know that we've been a shapeshifter in another lifetime, so maybe these stories began with people connecting with their ancestors who were actually shapeshifters and who were able to shape into wolves, you know, and that those stories just went forward into time where now they end up just coming out with Halloween, you know. So I'm definitely excited to see what the audience thinks of that. And like, what do you think? Like, do you have ancestors that turned into wolves, or have you seen ghosts on Halloween when the veil was thinner? So I'm really excited to see what you guys think about that. And yeah, I've always wondered about that myself, really, because I always felt very connected to werewolves and like the full moon and all that mystical energy surrounding those beings, you know?
Yeah. And I remember being told I would say it was towards the beginning of my awakening journey, but I've been reminded of it many times since, that anything that has been imagined is real because it comes from somewhere. So,
Yeah,
but I do believe that a lot of these, have become stories for entertainment and
of
it
course.
comes from a truth that has been twisted into different mythologies. Just like, we have a lot of stories about the ancient gods and goddesses, the Greek gods and goddesses, for example. And a lot of them are really awful stories, but when you connect with them, there's not always such a negative vibe around them. And so, and they'll even tell you that their stories have been twisted and misconstrued to create fear and to, I don't know, lots of different reasons behind it. But I would say that's probably the same thing with with these beings of the darkness. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Like all of these ghost stories that are out there, and it's so weird because on the one hand, I totally understand that you have like no idea what's going on, and these stories form themselves. But on the other hand, that now we know better, so we take it with a grain of salt, and we see how reality is for us, because like everyone has their own perspective. So I think it's really important to keep that in mind. Like everyone has their own idea about these things, but like ghosts, for instance, like when I was a child, I would believe that ghost like was a bad connotation for me. That was like ghost was something negative. And now when I think of a ghost, I actually think of like spirit orbs, that's what I think of when I think about ghosts. And that's because it has now a positive connotation in my mind, but that's only because I had opened up to a different perspective, and I didn't get stuck in what other people were portraying it as. So I think it's really important that we make up our own mind about these things.
Yes. And also remembering that there are, I don't know how to say this, like different aspects to that. So if we were talking about ghosts, which I think is a perfect place to look at this, is that there's a lot of different energies here, because we know that there are old buildings or places that hold ghosts, and they're not always necessarily good. And they could be an imprint of an experience or an energy in that place, and not necessarily a ghost. It could be so I've actually picked up ghosts of my past. So I'm just like now remembering this. So if we're murdered, then a piece of our soul, this is when we do soul retrieval, right? So we go and we retrieve that bit of our soul. So we can be haunting a place, not be consciously aware, but there's a piece of our soul that is somewhere else haunting or just hanging out somewhere. And when we do the soul retrieval, we bring that piece of ourselves back. So I actually did this with a client. It wasn't too terrible long ago, but it was a particularly strong ghost, like ghost energy that was her. And I said, okay, so you've been haunting this forest for the past 400 plus years. I got 400 years, I don't know. And now you're like, the people are going to be like, oh, that forest feels so much better than it did, like all of a sudden we just like changed the energy because we did like a soul retrieval. So there's that aspect of ghosts, they're not so necessarily aware, it's just a piece of their soul. And one of the houses that I grew up, well, I think we lived there for a few years when I was a kid. When we lived in this house, there were there were four of us kids, I think, when we lived there. There were five of us total, but I think my sister was born after we moved. So there were four of us, four kids, my mom and dad. And it was a 3-bedroom house, but one of the bedrooms we didn't use. So we used 2 bedrooms, and then that was like the guest room, which we did not put any guests in ever. My mom and dad would sleep in there, but I remember painting that room, and I remember crazy things happening, and I remember just knowing the ghost. And I know that like it's weird because it's like I remember remembering type of thing, but I also just have this knowing, I guess, within myself too, about this ghost that lived there, and he wasn't very friendly. And when I asked my mom about it, probably 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, I asked my mom, so when we lived in that house on Lizelle Street, was it haunted? Because I just wanted to like catch her off guard. And I did catch her off guard, and she wouldn't answer. And she just was just like kind of circled around it, and that, she had to sleep in there sometimes. And I don't even remember like her excuses around going around it. I'm just like, Mom, I remember that there was a ghost in that house. Like, I know that there was a ghost there, but he was like in that room mainly. And I don't really remember like being terribly afraid. We just didn't hang out in that room. But I remember painting the walls and weird things happening and stuff like that. So that house is gone now. It's been demolished. But yeah, that's my experience with a ghost as a kid. I think it's the only experience I remember as a kid of a ghost.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, and it's so cool that you share that experience, because it's so important to remind ourselves to go deeper into the energy before judging. Because I have also learned that when something traumatic happens, so like you said, like a murder happens, or a rape happens, or something really traumatic happens, that sometimes residual energy of that event will stay in a place. And when people add to that energy, because that energy stays over there, and when people go into that room, they feel like, oh, something, it feels not quite right here, and they build upon that energy, and that is how most haunted houses like exist, like, because there was this residual energy, and it wasn't really a ghost or anything. It was just that energy stuck over there, and then people start adding on to it, because they start telling stories about it, and like assumptions about it, about what it is or what it could be. And then they start building upon that energy, and then it starts manifesting in what people expect it to do, and that hasn't anything to do with ghosts, but they get the label ghosts, like haunted house. And I think that's so like interesting that it can happen in that way too, because I have also heard about like um energy, like you said, about like the piece of the soul that gets left behind, and it like keeps repeating itself, like it's energy stuck in a loop. And
Yeah.
I think that's also very interesting.
Yeah.
I think a lot of ghost stories are actually also like the energy that is like being stuck in a loop.
Yeah, I do agree with that. And I think that people don't really know how to tell the difference.
Yeah.
Um, being being a natural medium, I remember things happening as a kid, but I blocked so many things out. And I also had a very reactive fear. Like I would react in fear pretty easily. So I would step away or put up my walls really quickly. Um, but I know like as a teenager, it was always like cool to be into the scary movies and to go to these abandoned houses that were supposedly haunted. It really wasn't me. Like I tried to be cool, but I'm just really not cool like that. I'm not a scary movie person. I don't want to be scared. Um and I don't like even if I go to a house that's supposedly haunted, like I don't want to say like I'm just going to blindly believe that it's haunted, but I'm also like very like cautious
Yeah.
because I do have a strong belief in negative energies. I do know that there are negative energies. And why would I like put myself in a situation to connect with them? For me, that doesn't make sense. Like I respect other people's opinions and beliefs around this, but for me, no, thank you.
Yeah, I totally get that. Like, I wouldn't go to a haunted house either. I think, especially now that I'm so aware of everything that's possible, like all the energies that it could be. But even before I was open with my spiritual abilities and everything, I think I unconsciously picked up on energies in rooms and situations. So I didn't want to put myself in that situation, even when I wasn't consciously picking up on them. Because you never know, like, if you're not really conscious about it, you never know what you might bring home.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll try to keep the story short, but I worked as a freelance publicist for quite a few years and I worked with authors all over the world. And one of the authors that I worked with is Greg Olson, and he is a true crime writer. Like he writes true crime, like, not I don't know, thrillers, I don't know, but he writes true crime. And he had wrote a young adult series that wasn't true crime, but it was based in a real town on the Olympic Peninsula um, in Washington State. And he invited me to go up for a lunch in a haunted house and a tour of the haunted town. And so me and my family drove up there and we had lunch in this haunted house, and it really was a haunted house. and this was before my spiritual awakening, but I was very aware of the energies that were in that home when we were there. And we weren't allowed to go in the basement because apparently there was an energy there that was really bad. And this was a house that nobody lived in. You know, it was just like, I don't even know what they did with it. It was in a state of disrepair. I think people, it it really could be fixed up to be a really beautiful home, but it was in a very bad state. But he just like set up a table in the main living area and ordered food from the restaurant down the street, and we all ate, and he shared about the books and stuff because it was basically like a publicity lunch for the people who were doing publicity for him. And then he brought us around to tour the town and some of the other houses, and I just remember I was with my ex-husband still, and we were walking down the street, and I remember telling him, well, there's a female ghost that lives in that house, and she does this and this and this and this and this. And I was like getting ahead of the tour and saying the different things, and then when we would get to them, then he would share about the ghosts or the experiences that have happened in that particular house. And it was like the same thing I had just said. And I think this was one time when my husband at the time was just like kind of a little amazed that I was being a little bit extra, you know, accurate on these ghosts. But I never really, other than that, the ghosts in the basement of the house where we had ate lunch, I never really felt anything bad. Like most of the ghosts were not, like they weren't troublemakers. They weren't really negative in any way. I didn't really feel the negativity from them, but it was a really interesting experience. And Greg is an awesome guy. And if you like true crime, especially true crime that takes place in Washington, definitely should read his books. Here I am still plugging him years later. But yeah, it is, ghost experiences are really interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, it's funny because when you were telling the story, it kind of reminded me that I think that a lot of people who are actually attracted to like ghosts or haunted houses actually are like, it's like a doorway to open up to see if spiritual things could be real, you know, because like it's like needing that thrill of like they are actually one foot in the spiritual world because like they're open to believing in ghosts and in entities that they can't see, and on the other hand they're still with their foot in this reality and like I need proof that something is gonna happen. So I think these are mostly like skeptical people who are actually already opening up to the spiritual side of life, you know.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I know when I had done this tour, it was before my spiritual awakening, but it was when I had grown up my whole life, like people kind of being teased for being a psychic. Like I never said I was a psychic, but I would accidentally predict things, and I would say things that I don't know. Like I was teased for being a psychic when I wasn't. Like I mean, I was, but I wasn't like advertising the fact. I'll just put it that way. So, um, before my spiritual awakening, I was noticing how much more I was being drawn into things for more proof. You know, like
Yeah.
that experience with the ghosts. Like I already believed in ghosts, but I wanted to have like me predicting ahead of Greg when he was going through the ghosts or the experiences in the different houses. It's not like they knew exactly who the ghosts were. I knew who the ghosts were more than he did, but when I would talk about it and then he would go through and he would talk about the experiences that they had in the house, it was just like validation for myself and my own
Yeah.
psychic abilities. But I didn't really like recognize how much in that moment. I was just kind of like, it was a little bit like a thrill ride for me because I was just like, oh my goodness, I was right. You know, like every time.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's so important because I had that too before I really started discovering my own spiritual abilities. I really started like watching things like ghost hunters, I think it's
Yep.
called, and like those kind of things. So yeah, I definitely relate to that, and like looking into the how do you say it, supernatural history of like our civilization. So I think that's really interesting. Before I forget, Thomas Thomas, Iwanko says it's interesting how you mentioned ghosts versus residual energies left over and the inability for many to distinguish, especially as you just shared there are many different types of energy, spirits, and entities, so many cannot even phantom one type of energy, let alone multiple. So true. And before I forget, because spirit is reminding me the third time, um, so I'm not supposed to forget, and I'm gonna mention it now. Something that also happens a lot is when people actually have their spiritual abilities manifesting in their surroundings because they are unconscious of it, they are not aware of it, and this can be perceived as how do you say it in English? Poltergeist. This can be perceived as a poltergeist because you are actually um, bursting out so many energy that you're making these things happen and you don't know it from yourself. So it seems like there's something in your room or something is knocking things over while it's actually your own energy doing these things and your own abilities making these things happen without you realizing that you're doing this.
That's a really good point. Yeah, that can absolutely happen for sure. And I feel like I have a memory of something and I'm just not, it's like it's not quite forming all of the way. So we'll just see if it comes in the rest of the way. But that is a really good point. I feel like I have more to say about it, but we'll see what comes in because it's not all there yet.
Yeah, and it happens with us like all the time. Like sometimes we connect with each other and like the connection is so bad and you're like, oh, I need to pull in my energy a little bit, you know? And when we do that, like the connection gets better right away. And sometimes my TV or my laptop will just like start up and I'm like, oh, like spirit is like getting my attention. But sometimes I notice that when I get frustrated, that I'm actually the one messing with my electronics without realizing it, you know? Because like there have been times where I was like, spirit, what is up? Like, why are you messing with my TV all the time? And they're like, that's not us, you know? So it's your own energy and notice that, you know? So I thought it was something really important.
Yeah, electronics especially, it's like very affected by our energy. So that is a really good example.
Do you want to read some comments?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, that maybe we should go through and see what people are saying. I need to scroll up a little bit here. Um, okay, so Nikki says happy Halloween. Happy Halloween, Nikki. Hello, Stacia. So Beth says, when I was talking about really deepening our connection with the shadow energy, our witchy energies, basically, she says, I'm feeling that pull as well, and I think I may be a shaman, which is something I'm going to explore. That's awesome. Good morning, Zaneta. I had to check the clock. Is it? Yeah, it is still morning. Beth says, I don't know anything about my past lives, but it's so interesting. Yeah, and yeah, like there's so much to talk about with past lives, but it's definitely like when we're really looking into those things, it can help us a lot. Like we have a lot of um, resistance to things because of past lives. Stacia says, I believe I was definitely a witch in a past life. Hecate came to me before this pandemic started, then appeared in two of my past life regressions. Wow. So yeah, definitely some really big things there. But then she says, I have reservations about going farther into this part of me, but I'm learning. So she had come to me when I was going through my divorce and I was really in a really dark place. It was the same time of year, actually. Well, it was probably September still. It wasn't October yet, I don't think, when she had come to me about looking into my shadows and really deepening that work into my shadows. So she's really, really great for doing the shadow work with. Hello, Roxanne. So Zaneta says, I remember one morning I got up early to get ready for my day because my daughter was getting ready for school and she called out to me asking if I was in the kitchen, but I was in the front of the house. I asked her the same thing and I saw this lady, which I thought was my daughter, wearing all black with a black hat. My daughter thought I was wearing a black hat as well. We both saw her. She was just passing by. That is very interesting. It is really cool when you get that validation from another person though, and it's like you both see a similar thing.
Yeah, definitely.
And Thomas says that's a great point about your own energy slash poltergeist. Yeah. So I haven't really looked into the poltergeist energy too terrible much on my own. So when you're talking, I kind of was feeling into it. And I know that there are entities that will purposely want to mess with you. And so it is possible for energies to come in and do that. But yeah, I would say that it's important to look at if your own energy is like, what is your state of mind already? And of course, if a poltergeist, if there's a real poltergeist there and really causing some havoc and chaos in your life, of course, your energy is going to be a little bit freaked out. But if you were in kind of a freak out when it all started, then looking at, am I causing this because I'm already in freak out? So a lot of people who experience poltergeists are people who have already been diagnosed with things like schizophrenia and I don't know, things like that. So a lot of times people don't really take them seriously and they'll accuse them of causing it. And sometimes they may be the ones causing it. And sometimes they may just be attracting lower vibrational energies, not on purpose, but because of their own state of mind and them having a really hard time or being in a place of struggle.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I think that's a good point.
So I thought maybe we could share a little bit about Halloween traditions because we're in different countries. You're in Europe and I am in the United States, so we do things differently. But before we started talking about that, I wanted to, let anybody know if you have like questions about the topics that we're talking about. You can pop them in. And Beth posted again, so let me read her comment here. Beth says, when I was a kid around 4, I had imaginary friends and would describe them to my mom. Do you think I was seeing ghosts or just my imagination? I don't really remember much when I was 4. That's a really good question. So my interpretation of this is that yes, when we're young, it's much easier for us to see energies. We can see fairies better, more clearly. We're open to it. We haven't yet been conditioned. So you could have imaginary friends that are fairies or other beings, including ghosts. So it's totally possible, but you also have a better imagination when you're young, and so you could imagine it. So Natalie, do you have anything to add to that?
So I was thinking, like, when if she wants to like discern the difference a little bit, I think it's very important to think that when we imagine things, that we actually pull from our own mind. So when we imagine things, these are going to be things sooner that you've already seen in your life. So we will put our filters on our imagination. Like when a witch comes forward in your imagination when you're a child, you will see a woman with probably a broom and a hat, because that's how we imagine witches. And when someone else comes forward that isn't that atypical thing that you would imagine, but they tell you afterwards, like, look, I'm a witch, then I think that that would probably be a guide, instead of you imagining, oh, it's a witch because she has this and this and this. So I would think, like, does she have the atypical things that I would filter in my mind? Or does she look more out of the box, like something that I wouldn't have imagined, but it came forward that way? So I'm just going to take it at face value.
That is a really good point, a really good way of putting it. Because if your imaginary friend, I know this might be hard for you to remember, Beth, because you were so young, but if your imaginary friend was a character on TV, or was someone from a book that your mom had read you, or I don't know, something like that, then it probably imaginary. or very likely imaginary, although every energy comes from something. So, we can't even say then for sure. But otherwise, like I would say it's a very good chance that um, it could be, an energy that isn't of this physical world, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. What I try to remember is when I first started to discern if it was my imaginations or my guides. I would like think about the things that they were saying and like notice how it came forward. So when I noticed they were using words that I wouldn't normally use,
Yeah.
then I knew, yeah. So that's how I knew. Or like have this, like, I don't want to say like accent is like a too much of a big word for it, but like just a different way of communicating
Right.
than I would do when I'm talking to myself in my head.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I agree with that. Like they just have a different cadence to their voice. Like it
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly that. So when I was a kid, I grew up here in the United States in the 80s, and mostly in the 80s. I was young in the 80s. And my parents are really, really strict, and their whole being religious thing kind of kept them even more strict when it came to Halloween. But they did let us to dress up, but we didn't get to buy our costumes. So we dressed up in things that we had around the house, like being a hobo. You wear clothes, carry a stick with a shirt on it or something. I don't even know. But we could dress up and things like that. And then we could go to the houses of the people that we knew. So we could go to the houses that were directly next to us, except for one of our next door neighbors. We didn't really want to go to their house because we wanted to avoid those people. Um, but so we could go to the neighbors that we knew really well. So we could go trick-or-treating at like just a few houses. It wasn't very much. Like everybody else would go like through the whole neighborhood, and here we got to visit 3 houses. I was always so disappointed when I was a kid because we didn't get to go trick-or-treating at very many houses. And then we would usually go to my grandma's house, and she would give us candy. And then her next door neighbors on either side, and she had a friend that lived across the street, and we would go trick-or-treating there. So those were all the places that we could go trick-or-treating at. There was one year where we went to it was a what do they call it? It was like a nursing home or an old folks home. And so they would all come out in the hall. And so you just have this line of kids, and the line would just go through, and at each person, the old folk would give them one piece of candy. And that was what I remember from that, is it was usually like old people candy. So you're getting the candy that you don't actually really want that much. But it was like I was just happy to get to do something besides go to 3 houses and go trick-or-treating. So, but I was never allowed to do any Halloween parties or anything like that because my family was really strict. But in the United States, it is pretty common to have Halloween parties, or to have like a school have a Halloween party, or churches to do Halloween parties to keep kids off of the streets. But it's most normal, and this is how it's always been with my kids, is they can trick or treat the neighborhood. This year obviously we can't, but every other year they would trick or treat the neighborhood, and they would either I would bring them, or they would go with their friends, and they could just go through the whole neighborhood that we lived in at that time. And then last year we didn't live in that neighborhood anymore, but my daughter went anyways with her friend. Actually, my son might have went with no, we went with my son's other friend. So my kids have always gotten to, go trick-or-treating through pretty much an entire neighborhood. But it's mostly just like the fun of doing it and seeing the decorations. And we lived in a neighborhood that people did decorate. They had lots of lights, and they had like not weird, but they had like figures outside, and they would like dress up their doorway to be really, really spooky and have sounds like different spooky music, or when you walked up, a scary sound would happen, or something would jump out at you and stuff like that. And so it was pretty cool. The neighborhood that my kids grew up in was very Halloween friendly. So since we moved, it's like we live in an apartment complex, and yeah, some people dress up, but people don't really go trick-or-treating in apartment complexes, by what I can tell. So that's kind of how Halloween has been here. How was it for you growing up?
So it's actually funny because I think when I was a kid, Halloween wasn't really a big thing over here. So I don't really remember celebrating Halloween as a kid. Like, definitely not going out on the streets and trick or treating. Like, that's not something that we did over here. But what we did do was like, I have loads of nieces. So I think there's like 10 of us, all girls, and like we all have like the same age. So that was really fun. And then we all came to like my house because I live in the house where my grandparents lived. So we would all like come together and like dress up for each other, you know, and like watch scary movies and like have fun and like have a sleepover. That's kind of what we did. And then my mom always made like this Halloween like meatloaf, I think you guys call it, and like with these like figurines and like so yeah, I think in Belgium, it's coming up more now because it's coming over from America. So I think by now the kids do go trick or treating. Oh, not with the COVID, of course, but last year I think.
Right.
So yeah, it's coming up here in Belgium to go trick or treating, and I love that because I really love what you were saying just now. Like that must be so magical to like experience that as a child. And I think, yeah, Halloween is like, it's so fun. Like all these kids can be like, one day they can be who they want to be and like dress up how they want to dress up. And I think that's so special. And also I really loved those moments where we came together as like a family and like all of the nieces were together. So I think it's really important that I have those memories. And I think that's what Halloween really represents for me, like a coming together of like the family and like having fun. And yeah, just like being together is the most important thing. I think, of course, over the years, it evolved as we were going into our 20s. We go to parties together, you know, but I think it's perfect because like I have two sisters, so we always try to do something that matches with each other, and we always go like all in. So for all of the Halloween parties that I can remember, like my sisters and I always went all in for that. So we were always like over the top, dressed up and like our makeup done, you know, and like I really like to go like the scary route. So I don't want to be like that pretty girl on Halloween. Like, no, I want an original idea. I want to have fun. I want to be scary, you know? So that's something that I really remember, like being original and like not being scared to be who you want to be on Halloween.
Yeah, I really like that a lot. And I feel like, I when I had kids, I was like, I was really disappointed, like looking back on my own childhood and how much I had missed out on because it was like all of my costumes just had to be with stuff around the house. So it was like super lame stuff, like I never really got to like dress up as something really cool. I didn't get to become someone else. It didn't feel like I got to become someone else. So
Yeah.
there were a few years with my kids where I was like, you know what, I'm going to dress up with them because I want to become someone else. And I bought a wig. It was before I had purple hair, I think. I had bought a wig and I bought like a dress and I might have gotten a witch hat. I can't remember if I had a hat or not. I remember looking at them. I might not have bought them, but yeah, like I just wanted to like become someone else. Like I really like that whole thing of
Yeah.
being whoever you want to be, and it's totally and completely acceptable. And yeah, it's just that layer of fun. But for me, if I go to that extent, then I want like people to see it, like for me, just staying in, I don't know. I probably wouldn't have enough motivation to do that, just to dress up, just to stay at home. I'd be like, no, I need to like go somewhere and I don't want to say like show off my costume, but at least be seen by other people.
Of course, like that's why, like you can be proud of that. Like you don't have to say it like quietly. You can be proud of that. I would do that too.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it can be a lot of work to put all that stuff together and money to buy the costume or the dress or whatever it is that you have on. So,
Definitely. And like the makeup, like maybe we should do a thread of like the past Halloweens. Like if someone has still, because I know that I have pictures of like the last few years. So I would love to do a thread about that, because like the time I put into that makeup sometimes, it's like hours of my life.
Exactly that. It's like you got to save that and like share that. So yeah, I think having a thread up would be a really good idea so that people can share those different things and yeah, your different costumes and makeup and whatever. And I know that I have some from my kids
Oh,
last year, maybe it was the year before. Maybe both years. I have pictures of my kids when they were dressed up. And this year, so this year we can't do trick or treating. And so I bought some bags of candy for the kids, and they want to watch Pirates of the Caribbean movie. So that is going to be our plan for this year.
oh, that's so cool. That's nice. That sounds like fun.
Yeah. They want to dress up as pirates, but we'll see what we have around here. I think my son might have been a pirate last year, so actually he probably already has a costume. He could dress up as a pirate again.
Oh.
And my daughter is a cosplayer, so she has lots of wigs and she likes to make costumes. That could be like
Mm,
her future job, actually. She likes it so much. So
I love that.
yeah,
That's so creative. And like, have you seen these people who do that for a job? Like, that's amazing, the things they create. It's so beautiful.
it is really amazing. A few years ago, this was actually, my daughter is 15. This was probably when she was 10. I would say it was probably at least 5 years ago. She started making a I don't know what you call it, but it's like a head, you put it over. It's not just a mask, it's like a whole head. And she made it out of foam. She like glued the pieces of foam together. She like carved it like you would like shaped it with scraping bits of the foam away to shape it
Yeah.
into a head of I don't know. I don't know who it is. I'm not like up on the kid movies and stuff. I want to say it's like the shoot, what is that called? But it's like a fox or something. I don't know, but it's from some show or video game or something. But yeah, it looks amazing though. And she just keeps like adding uh-oh, my computer wants to restart.
That's so interesting. It's funny because I always wanted to be a makeup artist when I was little, and you should let her watch Face Off. Or maybe you should watch it together with her, because sometimes they do like it's like the makeup for the movies, but like the sci-fi stuff. And they have like different things, that like teams that they have to make a costume for, and there are so many seasons. Like, I love that show because it goes so far and you learn so much from it, and like you can even see how they like sculpt the masks and everything. So I think that's really interesting.
I have watched, I don't know if it was that, but I watched something like that. I'm just like kind of having a memory of that. I don't know. I must have like cruised. I feel like I watched them all and it was only like one season. I don't know if it was the same thing, but yeah, I'm definitely going to have to look because that's definitely the stuff that she's really into and she is very creative.
Yeah, definitely. Should we read the comments more before we go off?
Yeah, we probably should because somehow it has already been an hour. So, hello, Kayla. And hello, Jennifer. Jennifer says, Happy Halloween, witches.
I love that.
I know, right? Lisa says, I think you need to increase the conversation on Fridays from 1 hour to 2. I know, right? Like we could talk forever. Zenaida says, this is crazy. Everything you're saying, it's like I've heard it before. Deja vu moment. Very interesting.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting? I saw that pop up earlier, actually, and when I read it, it came into my head that we might visit each other in dream time. So I think that's really interesting.
That is really interesting. I had a dream last night. So a lot of times things come up in our dreams for us to release. And it came up again after, I don't know, it's been a little while, but I had a similar dream where I was releasing the shoot. It's like it just slipped from my mind what it was. It was it's like I know it, but I don't know it. It's so weird. Maybe I'm not supposed to say it or something. betrayal. So, and it was all like things like people in my dream that I didn't know, situations I've never been in before, but I was betrayed in my dream, and it was really intense betrayal energy. So I don't know why, I just thought I would bring that up, that there's so many things that come up in our dreams that like I just
Yeah, but it does though, because it's so funny. This week I had something very funny happen because I dreamt that I was going to work, but I woke up at 11:30 in my dream, and I was like, "Oh my god, how can it be 11:30? Like I need to go to work in my dream." And I started panicking, and then I woke up, and it was actually 11:15. So yeah, so that was really weird because it was like I skipped like that quarter in my dream. So yeah, I think that was really interesting.
so weird.
Right, I was like, huh, because it was like I went back in time, when I woke up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is really weird. All right, so I guess we will go because these videos and replay get really long for people. I know that it's awesome on the lives, but sometimes it's hard to watch the whole thing on replay. So that's why we try to keep it close to an hour. But thank you guys so much for joining us today. It's always so much fun to come on here and talk with you and share stuff. This time I just knew like we didn't like want to narrow it down too much. Just like let's just talk about the theme of Halloween. So we would love to have you guys share with us, though, your own experiences and your thoughts and traditions around Halloween. You can share it
Yeah.
in the thread, you can post in the group. If you're joining us from YouTube, we do have a group, and that's where we are live at this moment of recording this. And it's called Sorceress Circle, and we'll have the link below so that you can join us there, and then you can catch us live. So yeah, we will let you guys go, but I hope that you have a magical, amazing Halloween or Samhain weekend, and we will see you guys next week. Bye.
Bye guys.